And the difference is, as a military spouse, every single day I could have walked away from the Marine Corps. Every single day. And I chose to stay.
Hello, this is Tab Bartley, and you are listening to the Oath We Took podcast, the show that tells the Marine Corps story through those that served. I'm joined today by Nila Thompson. She is the reason for this podcast. I know so many amazing Marines who hesitate to tell their stories. Their stories hold so much power and so many life lessons. Oftentimes, though, they go untold. Not every Marine story is the same. What is the same is the oath that we all took. I'm honored today to have Nila on to share a piece of her story. She's actually the first spouse that we're interviewing on the podcast today. We will talk about her journey as a Marine Corps spouse and how she continues to serve veterans today. Nila, thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm honored to have you on the podcast.
Oh, it is an absolute pleasure. As a Marine Corps spouse and as a family readiness officer for the Marine Corps, I truly value what you are doing to bring these stories to light. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time and listening to the stories that need to be told.
And I think it's so important to tell the stories of spouses too, and those who are connected to the Marine Corps, right? Because the Marines as much as we like to pretend we can do it all on our own, we can't do it on our own. And so I think it was really cool when I interviewed your husband, Bruce, a few episodes ago, and he was like, my wife would be interested. And I was like, really? Perfect. I have been wanting a spouse on, and I follow you both on LinkedIn and see what you're doing. So I'm excited to be here. So I think the first question I have for you is, when did you actually become a military spouse, or when did you become kind of part of that world?
So Bruce and I have known each other for over 30 years. We've known each other since before the Marine Corps. We've actually been married for 20 this year. So while I kind of experienced what he was doing in the Marine Corps when we were still just friends, it was a whole different ball game when I became a spouse, and I had no idea. After all these years, I look back and say, how did we manage to do all of that? How did we get through all of those hurdles? But I can tell you, every single hurdle made us stronger, made us better together.
And you kind of touched on it before a little bit right there, but how much knowledge did you have about the military beforehand?
So my family was very involved with the military. Actually, my grandfather served during World War II. He was a bombardier. He instilled in us the importance of taking care of our service members. We, on a regular basis, we had several bases in our hometown. On a regular basis, invitations out to service members in case they didn't have anywhere else to go for the holidays. We would always have an open table for them to come join our family. So I was raised with the knowledge that we take care of our service members because they have sacrificed their life. They've made a commitment to serve our country. So it was instilled in me in a very young age.
And, you talked about sacrifices, but family members and spouses, I mean, there's a huge amount of sacrifices that role has. And what are some of the challenges, maybe first, that you guys faced in your marriage and as a family? And then I'd like to focus more on you personally. What were some of the specific personal challenges?
Oh, really, really great question, because, there are, when you do marry into the Marine Corps, there are sacrifices that you make as a spouse. Early on in our marriage, we were apart every other year because of deployments and training and inspections. He'd have to go off and inspect other units. So those moments that I had to take care of the family, and the deployment curse is real. Let me just say that anytime a service member is gone, everything breaks, and we have to, as a spouse, we have to hold it together. And especially if we have children, we don't have a choice but to march forward. We have to put on our big girl panties and just keep going. So those early challenges of, oh my gosh, you're gone again. And the squirrel, got caught in the serpentine belt in the van, and the tire blew out, and that all happened in 1 week. Those are true stories. You learn to become independent. You learn to become strong. And I don't want to say it didn't matter that he was gone, but I knew I was going to be okay if he was gone serving our country, because I gained the confidence to handle anything that was thrown at me. I gained that confidence to do it.
And I think one of the things too, it's not like as a Marine that you have this massive supportive command, or you have all of these people that you easily know that you can go to, right? Because as a Marine, you're integrated into the community, and you're forced to get this information, as where spouses honestly have to rely heavily on their Marines to give them certain information, or to figure out how to find it out themselves. And being a new parent, or somewhere you've never been, how did you manage that?
I saw early on in our marriage, as I was dealing with some of these struggles on my own, I saw a need for military spouses to be more informed, more resources. And I was lucky enough to meet spouses that were building the family readiness program. And I said, I want to be a part of that. I want to be able to teach younger spouses the resources that are available, because at that point, it was just, you researched and maybe you found something, otherwise you just kind of stumbled through it. And not even knowing the resources. There are so many resources out there today for military families. But being a family readiness officer, it was always my primary purpose was to make sure the families had the resources that they need, no matter what the struggle was. And sometimes Marines don't want family readiness officers to be involved in their family. That's a big challenge. And I had to convince the Marines that it was safe to let me in, because as a FRO, that's what they called us. We were part of the command, and allowing a part of the command into your family is kind of a big deal.
And especially, like, again, I was a junior Marine who got pregnant as a Lance Corporal. And we talk about like the financial burdens. I think a lot of people who are outside the military don't understand, like, you're not getting paid the big bucks. Like, you're not rolling in dough. There's not like it. And so from the family readiness side, and I came in 2010, where, that program was super established. When I was at Quantico, it was very much, at that point, at least for my command, like, here's a great resource for anybody with a family, and they know the things and they can get you the resources. And it was such an amazing tool to have. But I never thought about how, especially initially starting up, how, you guys are a part of the command, and people don't want you to be there, because what if you say something and report it to the command, or what if it results in the negative? How did you combat that?
It's about building trust. I can tell you, I've worked with 2 different units, and it was always that first amount of time was just building trust within my Marines, knowing that I was there to help them. I wasn't there to gossip about them, about what they were going through. I was strictly there, and I had some amazing chaplains that I worked with as well. And the chaplain and I would simply go around to every single company and start walking. Like, I had ammo company, which was great because we were down in the hole, and we just walk around, and it was a great walk, but we got to be where they worked, and having the chaplain support what I was doing as well was huge. Everybody trusts chaps.
Yeah.
So it was building that trust, making sure I wasn't one that was talking about their stories behind their backs, and being able to support them, to help them with resources and helping them solve issues. It wasn't about solving the issue for them, but teaching them how to do it. teaching them what was available to them. And that built a lot of trust with my Marines, that they had someone to go to that wasn't just jumping up to, the sergeant major or the CO saying, oh, so-and-so has this issue. No, in fact, I do want to say, during new join briefs, I would often tell them to Google the battalion and who would come up. And, everyone says the CO and sergeant major. I said, so if you get your spouse mad at you and they Google the battalion, who are they going to contact? I said, who would you rather they contact? So take my information, give it to your spouse, make sure that they have it, because I'm the one you want them to contact, because I'm going to resolve the issue at my level and keep it off the CO and sergeant major's desk.
And what an amazing way to be. And what were some of the main struggles, either like you saw as a spouse and then really like were able to, from your personal experience, bring to that fro relationship? And what were some of like the main resources that you saw trending that were really needed or really asked about?
And I think you touched on it. Finances are a huge, huge issue. One, because a lot of my Marines were never taught how to balance a budget, how to spend their money, how to invest. They've never done that. And although you have someone on the staff that is supposed to teach them about finances, it's really a check in the box. So having those resources that you could actually be taught how you need to budget, where you spend your money first, paying yourself so you have a nest egg. And in desperate times, who can we go to in order to help you out of a hole? We also had a lot, relationships are a huge issue, especially when you're younger, when you're first married into the Marine Corps. And that's what I tell my spouses as well. When you marry a Marine, you marry the Marine Corps. And so you can either fight against the Marine Corps or you can learn to love it. And that's going to determine how your marriage is going to go. So we did, the chaplain and I set up a lot of like relationship courses that our couples attended, just to learn how to better communicate. Because just that little communication can be the difference on if that marriage made it or not. So it's so important to have that structure and that communication in order for a better marriage and a better Marine Corps, really, because if you're not stressed about things that are going on at home, you can focus on the mission.
And I think that's where the conversation comes so much, that like as a spouse, you are serving us in a different capacity, but like you're making all of these sacrifices and stuff as well. And it's amazing to me how much you're saying, like, Marines aren't taught, right? They were people before. So like, what were their lives before? It just, the resources and how important that is, and in such a respectful way where you're giving them the tools and the power, right? Like that is such an empowering way and approach for it. I do know one of the main struggles in the spouse community is they have the highest unemployment rate at 22%, which is just, it's extreme. We talk about it at work all the time, and it's just one of those things. And so you as a fro, you had a job while you were a spouse, but was that the norm? Was there a time when you didn't have a job? And how is it finding a job as a spouse?
Oh, let me tell you. So I was a fro for one unit, and it took me, I volunteered for several years before I got that fro position. And shortly after I was able to get that position, which is a highly sought after position, it's not easy to become a fro. We got orders. Of course, that's what happens. So it's like this job that I've really been after this for a few years now, I finally get, and we have to PCS. And I had to give that up. And I loved my job. I loved having my own Marines and sailors to look after. And so we had to move. You look at and one of the reasons I do what I do, at Talents Ascend is because if you look at my resume, you see history gaps. And having been a hiring manager before, I look at history gaps as you have no commitment. You're going to leave me too. It tells a different story that is absolutely not true. And so oftentimes you're not going to get the interview. They see your resume, say, nope, you're a job hopper, and they move on. There were so many times that I would put my resume in for these positions that I was overqualified for, and I would not even get a call back. One of the reasons that I did go to the VFW is because they knew I was a military spouse, which we often didn't, during that time, we often didn't tell people we were military spouses, because it's like, okay, you're a military spouse, you're going to be gone in a couple of years. I'm not going to hire you. I'm not going to invest in training you because you are a military spouse. So it's that struggle, it's that frustration. And I can tell you that frustration can impact your marriage as well, because it's like, yeah, you came here to do a job. You had to jump straight into your job. So the command said, you've got a wife at home who can unpack the boxes, who can get the kids ready for school, who can do all of this other stuff. That's their job. You need to be at work. And let me tell you, the Marine Corps didn't pay me to do that. So it put my job search on hold. And that continuously happened. And so when we moved back to Camp Pendleton, I was lucky enough that one of the other froes was moving positions, and she's like, my job's opening up today. I need you to apply. I've already told them about you. And I was lucky to have that network, because I talk about network all the time. It's so important to know people, to talk to people, to engage, because that is what got my foot in the door for my second fro position. So that is super important for networking. But yes, the resume can be very damning to a military spouse.
And it's wild that you said, like, you didn't even say you were a military spouse, which, as I see such a correlation to when I was going through TAPS and they were telling me, I wasn't pregnant, but I was nursing and had a young child. And they were like, don't ever mention that you have children as a woman, because that instantly is going to be a questionable of, are you going to be available? And it's just like, how many things do we have to like hide about ourselves constantly, right? Which was very hard for me, because in the Marine Corps, it felt like everything was open and we talked about like everything, right? Like everything, big family, right. In the good and the bad ways, but you talk about everything. And so it's just wild to see that correlation go on so many things. And something I really wanted to talk about with you, and bringing Bruce up again, how was the transition for you as a military spouse? Because in his interview, and me and my husband were dual military, but we separated at completely different times. But he said something, and I'm probably going to get teary-eyed, because like I did in his interview, where he was in such a dark place and he was just kind of staying at home. And then finally got to the point where you were like, Bruce, this isn't you. This is what you need. You need to do this. And how for him, that was such a tipping point. But you're going through a transition as well. And you're bearing all the emotional weight, like just like everything. And so I want to know from your perspective, how was that experience for you? And what were, as a spouse, what are the things that you're seeing and that you're having to deal with at the same time? Because again, he's not the only, the Marine isn't the only one who is transitioning. It's the entire family. So how was the transition from your side of it?
It was challenging. Now, I want to say that when he decided it was time for him to take his pack off, he came home and we talked about it. We looked at everything and we said, okay, I told him, this is the date you can retire. It allowed us to make sure that we were debt free, that all the kids were out of the house, that we were going to be set up properly for our transition without struggling. So that part, and I, as you know, as a fro, I was able to give him resources and tell him, look, this class became available. You need to go to that. And he was able to focus on those things. And he did really well. I do have to say he was terrible at resumes. And I don't know if he mentioned that there was this, and we talk about vet CTAP all the time. We went to this course and I went with him because he really didn't want to go by himself. And they wanted to see, you know, what you came up with for a resume, and he hid his under the table. I grabbed his resume and I handed it to the instructor. She goes, this is terrible, but it's a good starting point. Now we know where we need to work. And I can tell you from that point on, it was like a change. He was focused on, okay, this is how I can better myself. He wasn't hiding anymore. Where the struggle hit was when he actually took that uniform off. And he went to that first job. And watching that transition, while I was still able to work with my Marines and sailors, and I was working a lot of hours, but watching him go through that, and I couldn't help him in any way except to tell him the first job he got, he hated it. And he was just becoming this other person. And I'm like, you can quit. You don't have to. And he's like, you're okay with that? I'm like, absolutely. I'm like, look, you have served almost 24 years. You've served our country. I want you to look for something that you love. So take a breather. What I didn't mean was go lay on the couch. I didn't mean go, him not being a dog person, I would come home and he'd still be laying with the dog, who was my dog, but not after he retired. He owned her after that. They were best friends. He loved her so much. He's like, oh, I get it now. But yes, I had to step in and say, this is not what I meant. You need people. He's a social butterfly. You need to go out, get out. And so he was playing golf by himself. And he wasn't talking to anyone. I'm like, nope, this is not what I meant either. So I had to be very clear. And I said, what is it that you want to do? And he's all about advocacy for our community, right? And I see that in a lot of service members. They still want to serve. They still want to take care of their brothers and sisters. And he has done that ever since. And that's what got him off the couch, is being able to continue serving. And it was hard for me when it came time. I had to leave my fro job again, which I love so much. But I knew we had to move for his sake, because he didn't like where, we were located in California. And at the end of the day, it's the two of us, it's us. We've got to be strong for each other. And I, as reluctant as I was to give up that position again and leave my Marines and sailors, I was excited for the next chapter of our journey. And the fact that we're still advocating for our community has made that transition so much easier. I will say, as a veteran spouse, there are not a lot of resources for us out there. You can ask certain veteran resources if they help with the spouse side as well, and find out that way. But I can tell you, there are not, once you're no longer an active military spouse, those gates close and there's fewer resources available for you.
Which is, again, wild, because you've spent all of these years sacrificing, and it's not like you said, it's not like your resume gaps automatically clear up when they exit the military. It's not like those things just resolve themselves. And so that is wild. And again, I'm dual military, so it's something that me and my husband, we didn't see because we're both veterans. Yeah. But you made one of the comments you made, and I just want to point this out because I got mental health help because my husband stepped in, and you made the comment that he got up because of serving others. But I have to say, as a spouse, and having watched his interview and you haven't watched it yet, he got up because of you, and he started making that moves because of you, and how powerful that is and how amazing it is. And I think it's a great example, especially for those younger military marriages and stuff, that you can make it through this, right? Like you can make it through all the struggles, and there will be a ton, but like that's life. There's a ton of struggles in life. And so I just wanted to say that, like, yes, he does all these things, but you were the reason why he ended up actually getting up off the couch and going down that path. And now you guys are both together making a huge impact. And so can you tell me a little bit about Talent Ascend and how you guys kind of got to this point together where you're serving together now in a different capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, one of the things I hate is resumes. My history gaps, they don't reflect who I am as a person. Several years ago, I met a woman, Robin Grable, and she is a Navy veteran with over 30 years of HR experience as well under her belt. And she recognized that veterans were having a challenge with getting their resume past applicant tracking systems. Resumes was a huge choking point in their transition. So she wanted to create a solution, like all great veterans do. They want to find solutions for that. So she created what is now Talents Ascend. It used to be Veterans Ascend. We have expanded. But there are no resumes, applications, or job boards. We actually use your skills and match you to employers' positions within our system. So it eliminates the resume completely. Someone will no longer see me for my history gaps, but they'll match to me for the skills that I bring to the table. And the skills, more importantly, the skills I want to use. How we talked about what Bruce, his first job, and he hated it. He was using skills that he didn't like. And so when you create a profile on Talents Ascend and you're able to adjust your skills to the skills that you want to use in your next career, you're more likely going to love that next career. You're going to enjoy using those skills. So you're no longer trying to force yourself into someone else's box. And I use this all the time, but I think it's the best way to explain it. Because when you're adapting and changing your resume to fit into a job posting, that's what you're doing. You're forcing yourself into their box, into what they want to create. When you create a profile with us, you're creating your own box. You're creating your own profile, so employers can actually choose you for what you want to bring to the table. So you get to be yourself and not force yourself into something else. So when I met her and she happened to tell Bruce that she had an opening, I'm like, pick me. I love what you do and I want to be a part of it. And I was so thankful. She said, well, yes. And so it's just been an absolute pleasure to find a new way to hire our community. And now the platform, we've expanded it while we still focus on our underserved community and our military and veteran community. The platform is now open to everyone.
And I think that's so And I think that's so cool that you say, underserved communities, and looking at again, you're taking a completely different approach, that somebody may be able to do a job, right? But their resume may just not show it in the way that you think that the person who's reviewing it thinks that it should. And so to alleviate that and to make it really be about people. And then I just think of what is it, like 80 or 90% of veterans leave the first job they have out of the military. It's some crazy high statistic. And how much this would fix stuff like that, and how likely you are more to stay somewhere because, like, culturally it fits too. And there's so many more ways that it fits. What is some of the impact that you have seen now that you've been doing this for a while? You're there almost from the get-go. How have you seen this impact, and what are some of the personal triumphs you've seen?
So when I was still with my unit, I would often remind my transitioning service members to get started early. And especially, senior leaders, they'd be a couple weeks out and they hadn't even started their transition. It's like, no, I've got work to do. And it was struggle. I watched them struggle. I did mock interviews with them when, even after they retired, I would have them come back and do mock interviews and help them with their transition. And I always stressed to start that transition early, to not wait until the last minute, no matter what your rank is, no matter if you're enlisted or officer, start that transition early, start learning more about the civilian side of the house early so you can adapt better, because it's going to be better not only for you and your family, but your mental health. Your career is tied into your mental health. So I am so excited to see we've had more and more service members that are starting their transition 1 and 2 years out. I have preached this for so long, and for me, watching that happen, that is a triumph for me, because I've written articles about this. Don't fail at transition. Don't fail your Marines during transition. Don't fail yourself. But just to see that people are finally grasping that, I'm going to take that as a win.
It is for certain. And how does somebody get involved in Talent Ascend, or how do they apply?
All you have to do is go to talentascend.com. You go click create a profile. It takes maybe 15 minutes. And your profile's done. One profile instead of 1,000 different resumes for 1,000 different job postings. And what's great about it too is we've reversed the hiring process. So employers find you. They match to your profile. They only see basic information. So we've eliminated, certain information before they unlock you to avoid discrimination. They can't tell if you're male or female. They can't tell any demographics that your name may give away. We try and clear anything up that might cause any sort of ageism. They look at you for your skills, your location, and your salary, and say, okay, can this person, be a part? Do they have the skills that they need for this job? And then they unlock your profile and contact you directly. You don't even have to do anything. You just, if you get a notification, go check your profile for the notification, for the messages. You let the AI work for you.
That is so awesome. And another piece that I think is really cool about it is, and you mentioned it, but you set your salary. So you're not out here looking at job posts wondering like, what is the range of this? What are they actually going to pay for you to be able to do it? And essentially that's somebody saying like, yeah, your salary matches, or yeah, we could afford that salary.
Exactly. I mean, you put a range in there and then, they get to see your range and then they can offer you the position. But it is so quick and easy. We've had people match and do an interview and hired in less than a week, which is unheard of in traditional talent sourcing.
Yeah, it really is. And what a great resource that anybody can use. I mean, I think just reiterating, anybody can use this resource. Anyone. Well, I don't think I have any other questions besides the last question, but is there anything that I missed, or there's anything about maybe perceptions or preconceived notions about military spouses that you would like to discuss or bring up?
I have watched the military spouse make a huge transition over the last several years. They often used to refer to us as dependas. We were just there for the benefits and to raise the kids, and always great to be referred that way. But I've watched the military spouse blossom. I've watched them come to their own, and I have to say, one of the amazing things that happened through COVID, through being locked up, military spouses didn't miss a beat. they kept going. And I think the resilience and the way that they just overcame and they continued was an example for the country. Like, so we're shut down. What now? This is what we can do to overcome this. And they kept working. They kept going. They showed people that it can happen. And I can tell you, seeing a military spouse today, you know, you're dealing with a powerhouse. And just watching, you know, going from dependent to powerhouse, that is a beautiful thing. I will proudly tell someone I'm a military spouse now. That's not a hidden piece of information anymore. It's like, no, I'm a military spouse. I'm capable of anything.
You really are. And how you said, again, you come from having to hide it to now proud to say it, which is just amazing. And so the last question I have for you today is, if you had to do it all over again, would you?
The journey is a difficult one. But we don't go on journeys and have fun at them if they're easy. That would be boring. I would absolutely do this entire journey again, because every single hurdle, hole, or anything that we had to go through, every single bit of it made us stronger. You know, Bruce and I often say that we're great individually, but we're unstoppable together. And we're unstoppable now because we made it through all of that. We made it through the mud. And now, you know, we're better than we would have ever been. Those challenges made us the strongest marriage we could have.
This is the Oath We Took podcast, and you just heard a piece of the Marine Corps story through the experience of a military spouse. Their sacrifices matter. Their stories matter. Not every Marine story is the same. We didn't all join the military for the same reason. What is the same is the oath that we all took. An oath that easily could have ended in death, and for some, it did. So listeners, instead of asking you to thank a Marine for their service, I am going to challenge you to continue to listen to their stories instead.